My name is Greg Malone, and I am a volunteer with CAP-NL, Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides and Toxic Substances in Newfoundland and Labrador, and together with many other environmental groups, we are here to talk about. Well, we're here because of this this panel to review hydraulic fracturing that the government has set up for us. And we all feel that we know already the conclusions that this panel and this government will come to, and we feel that because they've told us. Most of the panelists have already said that they are in favor of hydraulic fracturing, despite the so-called dangers. So no real need to actually go around the province and find out what we think. A couple of stops should do it. Just one stop would look rather silly, so they made it 2 stops. 2 is practically a tour, for God's sake. And the people in Labrador are concerned they can fly into Corner Brook and tell us what they want. This is serious for Newfoundland and Labrador. We, CAP-NL, we're concerned about the toxic chemicals used, we're concerned about the high amounts of volume, the high volumes of water involved, and the disposal of the toxic wastewater, of which there is a considerable amount, and that's how these volatile chemicals travel is through the water. There's not a dry spot of ground in Newfoundland. We do not have a good record for doing things safely in Newfoundland, or for doing things in an environmentally responsible manner. Whether it is fish farms or mining, they have all left toxic mess behind for the communities to deal with. We have a lot of toxic sites in Newfoundland. We have high and escalating rates of cancer and neurological disorders in Newfoundland, highest in North America, and among our children. We don't have the wiggle room to dump any more toxic chemicals on ourselves here. We lost our cod fishery, the forests have been ravaged, yet we are now going to send out a pretend panel with its mind already made up to pretend to examine the very real dangers involved in hydraulic fracturing. We're going to blast the ground under our feet, inject it with toxic liquid to extract the noxious gases. Sounds like a real winner for Newfoundland. It's a winner for a couple of people and a handful of jobs, and it's a big loser for most of us, leaving a toxic mess and huge health problems. Not one health professional on this panel. Not one. The major concern of the panel is the health of the people of the province. Not one health professional, not one medical scientist. These are all oil and gas people and their attendants. One panel member has already expressed his opinion that our concerns over hydraulic fracturing are based on emotion. Imagine, disgusting emotion. That panelist is an economist. He is not emotional. He is Mr. Spock. We are Captain Kirk, or even poor Scotty. No, sir. We are all capable of research, and our concerns are based on science. But if you want to push the emotion button, you'll get plenty of it. You're not emotional? Fine. I am. Does that mean you're right and I'm wrong? Let's have that debate. Let's find out. He's not a geologist. He's not a health professional. He's an economist. What are his concerns based on? I wonder. I'm human. I'm emotional. I care about the deadly health effects of these toxic substances on our children and our communities. What do they care about, besides a quick buck? For argument's sake, let us just say this morning, for argument's sake in this room, that Newfoundland and Labrador lives matter. Newfoundland and Labrador lives matter. That's what this panel should be about. Not increasing dividends to the shareholders. Go into your panel with that mindset and those values at the top of your list, please. New York has just completed its review of hydraulic fracturing, a very extensive review New York did. After all, it's New York. They got more people than Canada, for God's sake. Their review panel conducted hearings, more than 2. They did the scientific work. They did their job for the people of New York. And after all the evidence was in, Howard Zucker, the Chief Health State Commissioner in New York, said, I have only one question to ask myself, and that is, would I let my family live in a community where there was fracking? And he said, and if I answer that question honestly, the answer is no. So Governor Cuomo and Howard Zucker, in New York, instituted a complete ban on hydraulic fracturing for the state of New York. And they joined Ontario in Nova Scotia. Yeah, these guys are public servants. Their record stands for itself. These people are people of integrity. Was that an emotional decision they made? Partly. I dare say it was. It could not have been an easy decision for New York to make, to give up the revenues from hydraulic fracturing. But it was the right decision for the people of New York. So my message to the people on the Newfoundland, Labrador panel for hydraulic fracturing is do your job and earn those inflated salaries that we're giving you all the time. Do it. Put aside your preconceptions and your dollar figures and think of your children and your children's friends playing on the ground in Stephenville and ask yourself if you want a hydraulic fracturing going on around them. You want to add to their toxic load? We're asking you to give them a fair hearing here and take this seriously and stop treating the process and the people the process is designed for with contempt. Now there's a lot of people here, a lot of very smart people, a lot of very passionate people, a lot of Newfoundlanders who have given up hours and days and weeks and years of their time to do these things right and to protect Newfoundlanders. The things that our government is being paid to do from our tax dollars and not doing. And they have a lot of great stuff to say, and a lot of more expert opinion than I have. And so I'm going to ask them to come up right now and talk to us. We have signatories to this meeting and to this concern about this panel from many environmental organizations. Citizens Against CETA, Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides and Toxic Substances, Divest MUN, East Coast Fracking Awareness Group, Newfoundland Labrador Fracking Awareness Network, Port-au-Port Fishery Committee, Port-au-Port Bay St. George Fracking Awareness Group, and the Research Exchange Group at MUN. And there's lots more, and all these groups represent a lot of people. There's a lot of people who care about this. So right now I'm going to ask for John Parsons from the Social Justice Co-op of Newfoundland to come up and tell us what he thinks. John, thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Parsons. I'm a board member with the Social Justice Cooperative of Newfoundland and Labrador. Our co-op has helped organize events on hydraulic fracturing here in St. John's, but also on the West Coast to try and raise awareness around this issue over the last couple of years. The first thing, to be very clear, what we're calling for today from the co-op is for consultations to be held throughout the province. We think that this is a provincial issue, that the water, the land, the air, that these are the common legacy of all the people of our province. Pollution, toxic chemicals, these sorts of things, they don't respect regional boundaries any more than water stays in one pond. Everything circulates, everything moves around. Moreover, since the outcomes of this panel's review process will impact any future discussions of hydraulic fracturing and other types of unconventional oil developments in the whole province, this really is, from the outset, a provincial issue, and there should be consultations held throughout the province. I don't think that it's enough, and our group doesn't think that it's enough to only hold consultations on the West Coast. Moreover, we also have some reservations about the composition of the panel. There are no women on this panel, there are no Indigenous voices represented on this panel, and there are no West Coast residents themselves on this panel, and this just doesn't make any sense for a review panel that's supposed to be looking at a process of hydraulic fracturing and of potential industrial developments on the West Coast. Finally, we feel that the panel should also be referencing what is known as the strong precautionary principle in its deliberations on hydraulic fracturing. As it stands, the government reference documents that the panel is using to understand risk assessment is using a method that's known as low as reasonably practicable. And this is a development that was used this risk assessment model was initially developed for understanding worker health and safety in Great Britain. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us that this is the risk assessment model that's being used to talk about an industrial development here in Newfoundland and Labrador. As Greg said, there are many regions surrounding us in the Atlantic Canadian region and in eastern New York that have already instituted bans and moratoria on hydraulic fracturing. If it's not good enough there, it's not good enough here. And in very basic terms, we think that this panel should recommend that this process not be allowed to continue. So I thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions further after this press conference.
Thanks a lot, John. And now, Marilyn Reed. I'll ask you please to come up. Marilyn is from Citizens Against CETA. And
so, as Greg said, my name is Marilyn Reed, and I represent Citizens Against CETA. And like the other groups here, like John, and I suspect just about everybody else, would call in for public consultations around the province to alert citizens to the issues, but also to get full feedback to the panel and government. But today I'm going to restrict our objections to the financial risks with CETA, or sorry, not with CETA, but with fracking. And I'll start with Lone Pine Resources, which is a Canadian corporation with registration in the United States that is using the NAFTA trade agreement to pursue an investor-state lawsuit against Canada for $250 million, and the reason is the Quebec moratorium on fracking. It would be naive to think that that can't happen to us. Oil and mining companies are the biggest users of investor-state lawsuits internationally, and they have the perfect instrument in NAFTA to sue us. So far, it's been the federal government that has paid the damages for these lawsuits. But the federal government has served notice that in future they are going to find ways to claw back costs from any province that provokes a lawsuit. And these damages can be huge. The largest so far is $2.3 billion that tiny Ecuador is having to pay to the oil company. The offshore tribunals that judge, the word judge is even dubious here, that award the damages don't have a permanent salary judge. Lawyers from a small group of elite law firms are appointed on a case-by-case basis to determine whether the country is guilty, and independent studies have documented the conflict of interest and corporate bias that are in these tribunals. Furthermore, Canadian law accounts for absolutely nothing in these tribunals, nor do Canadian court decisions, and there is no appeals court if the judgment goes against Canada. I point this out because if we go ahead with fracking, we run the risk of lawsuits not just under NAFTA, but under the looming CETA trade agreement with Europe. And over half of the investor-state lawsuits internationally have been filed by European companies. So you know where that's going to lead us. Even the tightening of fracking regulations could lead to an investor-state lawsuit if the regulations in any way limit the profits of the corporation, because there's this idea of expropriation of profits. And I don't think citizens or even politicians appreciate how much government's right to regulate the fracking industry will be constrained and indeed straitjacketed by trade agreements like NAFTA or CETA. I'd like to raise another financial consideration, and that is the early and high failure rate of wells which means that fracking companies constantly have to drill new wells and take on debt loads to do that. And the risk of bankruptcy, therefore, is very great, which means that the economic development in this province that is promised might be very short-lived. So if we allow fracking and bankruptcies take place, the province could be left with cleanup costs, and they could be very substantial. In conclusion, I'd like to say that when our government and the fracking panel do a risk analysis of fracking, it's essential that they consider the full financial context, including A, the financial fragility of the industry, B, the industry's enthusiastic use of investor-state lawsuits, and consequently the enormous costs that these two dynamics could bring to our province. In our opinion, as Citizens Against CETA, it would be a denial of financial prudence and common sense to go ahead with fracking.
Thank you. Very, very interesting, Marilyn. Fascinating stuff about our liability. And I think, yeah, something we don't want to get involved in. Next, from the Council of Canadians, I would like to ask Ken Kavanagh to come up and say a few words, please.
Thank
You, Ken.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to see so many media here, and I want to say right off the bat, thank you to Jenny and to Erica, who did a tremendous amount of work to make this press conference happen today and bringing groups together. Really appreciate it. I'm on the National Board of the Council of Canadians. I'm also involved with the local St. John's chapter, so I speak on behalf of the council and the chapter. We're here because we believe this fracking review panel and process is deeply flawed, to say the least. And we're really here for two reasons. One is we're here in support of our colleagues and fellow citizens on the West Coast, who I want to also now publicly thank for the tremendous work they have done. Because let's be very honest here, in the case of this fracking review panel, the fact that it's in place at all is not because this government had some on the road to Damascus enlightenment and said, yeah, we're concerned about fracking and we need to get the public to have a say in this. That wasn't it. They were low in the polling numbers, and the West Coast Fracking Group, because of their tremendous work, grassroots tremendous work, created such havoc for this government, they set up this panel. And I don't use the word set up lightly, because it's set up. The second reason why we're here is because this issue does not belong, as much as I respect the people of the West Coast, does not belong to the West Coast, or to the West Coast portion of this province. It belongs to the entire province. I own the West Coast. I own every part of this province just like you. So this is a provincial matter, and every citizen of this province has to be worried about fracking and the impact on its province. So this is a we issue, not a they issue. And we demand a balanced, a meaningful, a fully democratic review panel and a proper public consultation, not the sham that's going on now. And if you just look to the Wheeler report, and that process in Nova Scotia, not that it was perfect, but it was a damn lot better than this process here. They had a comprehensive set of terms of reference, if you want to go read it. They had an 11-person, 11-member panel that had a fairly broad set of expertise and experience across the panel. They made sure that there was Aboriginal representation, for instance. They had province-wide consultations. I think they had 11 across the entire province. We want to process something like that. This is far from that. And we call upon this government to go back to the drawing board and reconstitute a proper panel and a proper process with proper people on the panel and with proper consultations. Fracking is a pretty controversial, unconventional, dangerous oil gas extraction technique. Now the industry and the politicians like to say there's no harm, that there's no proof of harm. And they can cling to that false assertion if they wish. My own response to that is to quote a gentleman, Caleb Ben, who is an Indigenous lawyer who was at a press conference federally just last week, calling upon the federal government to do something about studying fracking and its impacts on people and the environment. And here's his quote: "Absence of proof of harm is not the absence of harm." That's a wonderful quote, isn't it? And that's exactly the case here. This is a dangerous technique. It impacts every part of this province, and I want to see a process that involves the entire province where citizens have a say in what's happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken. Yes, and if we know anything, it is that the oil and gas industry can be reckless and dangerous. We know that from the Ocean Ranger all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. We have plenty of examples of it. And now, from the Research Exchange Group of MUN, I'd like to ask Penny Allardyce to come and speak to you for a moment. Penny.
Should speak for me. You have spoken.
I want to hear your voice now for a minute.
Yeah, you will.
It's a change.
I have a connection with the West Coast. All my research from 1973 was focused on the lives and the welfare of families out around Stephenville. So it's very close to my heart what happens to them. But what you just said about it being a province-wide situation is true. There's no question about it. We're the ones who are paying for this. And the Research Exchange Group on the health impacts of fracking was set up to build research capacity in Newfoundland and Labrador on this public health issue. And I think I'd like to start with my conclusions if I can find them. Let me look, because I may not get to them otherwise. There are two recommendations, and they both cost money. One is that there have been, that before any industrial work is done that's going to have the possibility of affecting public health, there should be a health impact assessment carried out. And these assessments have not been carried out anywhere. All the work that was decided on by the other provinces and by the states was based on observations and collecting data, but there was no financing of studies to really look at the problem and see what the effect of the gas in the air or the poisons in the water or whatever the mothers are breathing when they're pregnant. No studies of that. So there needs to be money for health impact assessments. And the other thing that is missing is baseline studies. There's no data available that tells you how many people have headaches, how many people have asthma, how many people have this, and this is in the advantage of the industry, because they can say, well, we had nothing to do with that. That's just normal. That's just natural. So I guess that in the long term, the MUN group is set up to try to stimulate some research and to try to and I saw that Keogh is on the board of one of the granting agencies for Canada. So perhaps Keogh can give some money, encourage giving some money for baseline studies and health impact studies. How many more minutes do I have? One minute.
You're doing great.
I don't know where to start. I don't know where to finish. Nothing of the health impact sounds pleasant. All adds to healthcare costs. In Australia, a physician visited every family in her region. She found a significant increase in respiratory symptoms, frequent and prolonged nosebleeds, and severe and prolonged headaches, fatigue, numbness, and nerve problems. And many other studies have shown the same, but the problem again is that they don't have the baseline studies. And the effect on the developing fetus and on children is harmed. There's been some observation of increase in heart defects in embryos. The low birth weight increased. And all these things are not only impact the family and their responsibility for the development and care of their child, but also impact the expense of the healthcare system. Dr. Simpson was speaking very strongly about new observations on the effect of chemicals. Some chemicals have been found to be endocrine disruptors, so that the development of the person is affected that way. And also that these little particles can affect even the DNA. And we thought that DNA I thought DNA was a chromosome, and there it was. But these little particles can get in and can change the DNA and can affect the development of the infant in a way that may not show up until years later. And unless, you've got to take time to find these things out. These can't be found out by making that decision at the table. And I guess I would like to encourage this panel of men to think outside the box. I'd like to encourage them to start thinking about ethics. None of these people have talked anything about ethics. None of the people we're reading, none of the people on the panel, they don't have references on their website about ethics. Let them think about what we just heard, that if there's not enough evidence that there's no harm, then you take the precautionary approach and you wait to get the evidence before you allow these people to do what they want to do. And that thing about as low as reasonably probable, is that what is it? As low as reasonable? Practicable. I think it's as low as reasonable probable.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, those health effects are really real. And just one little thing, the government will also often say, well, Health Canada says what's allowed and what's not allowed and that sort of thing. No. Health Canada, these organizations are deeply politicized. Health Canada looks after our health in much the same way that DFO looked after the codfish. Okay? They've already failed. We already have high and escalating rates of neurological disorders and cancer in Canada. They have failed in their task. And that's why we're here. And now finally I would like to, from the East Coast Fracking Awareness Group, I would like to ask Paula Graham to come up and say a few words to us all.
Okay, thanks. I also want to start by congratulating everyone here, Jenny and Erica, for putting this together, and echo some of the other comments that, you know, the actions of the people on the west coast of this island is the reason that we're all here today, and I applaud them and commend them, and thank goodness they started speaking so that we can now all sort of speak together and amplify each other's voices. Okay, I have a lot of critiques of this manel, as I would like to call it, but I think for the next couple minutes I'm going to focus on the terms of reference that this manel is using, and it neglects two really important things. Penny Alderdice just spoke so wonderfully about the lack of health focus in the terms of reference, and you know, if we're not pursuing whatever industrial development or economic progress so that human life can be better, then I don't know why we're doing it, right? So human quality of life, which includes physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, cultural, all those aspects, you know, that's why we're all humans getting together, living in societies, feeding, clothing, housing, like that's why we're here, right? So if an industrial project is not going to directly raise people's quality of life, then I really don't know why we're doing it. So there's that. The other thing that the terms of reference excludes is the concept, the fact of climate change. And to me it just seems, pretty insane that a panel reviewing oil and gas development is explicitly not supposed to talk about climate change. Not only do I think it's kind of insane, I think it's a slap in the face to humanity. Yeah. I particularly think it's a slap in the face to people living up in Labrador. These are residents of our province that are, and there's lots of really good research about the negative mental health, emotional, and cultural impacts of climate change on people in the north. They're experiencing this not in terms of a big hurricane every couple years. This is every year their coastlines are growing smaller. Every year there's less food and animals to feed and clothe themselves. So I think to ignore the impact that further oil and gas development in Newfoundland will have on our own residents it's just a slap in the face. We might as well walk up to Labrador and slap people in the face. So, I think that's all I want to say, because we have such a great sort of coalition here covering so many different topics. Although I did have a great ending line.
A few good lines there.
Keep it out of your Paul.
You know what, forget it, I'm going to go with my slap in the face again. If we pursue fracking, this is a slap in the face to our own residents, right? People you know, people you love, people you talk to, and that's just rude. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. That was great and very refreshing and good stuff. We have 2 more people who would like to jump in and say a couple of things before we wind up. One from the Sierra Club of Canada, Fred Windsor. Fred, you here, buddy?
Yeah.
There you are. Give us your 2 minutes, Fred.
Okay, 2 minutes. Very good. No problem. Tell me when the first minute's over.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Fred Windsor. I'm the Conservation Chair with Sierra Club Canada for the Atlantic Canada region. And we've been fighting fracking since the first wells were being drilled down in Texas. And it's because one of our major areas of concern is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, not only in Newfoundland but around the world. And so it's good to be here today to talk to people about fracking. And actually, when I wrote the letter to the committee, I pondered the question: do we really need this? And do we really need this kind of energy extraction? Just looking at the globally around the changes in energy production over the last 20, 25 years. I mean, Germany is heading for sort of 40% of their electricity now is coming from green energy sources, that sort of thing. Did any of you see the Super Bowl this year? Probably not. I'm just taking a wild guess. But the Super Bowl this year was held in Arizona. And all of the energy provided for that Super Bowl was all green energy. 100%. Now in Newfoundland, and a lot of it came from wind. Now in Newfoundland we have wind. I think we all notice this, yes? In fact, we have the single most consistent, largest supply of wind in North America. There is nobody even close to us. Now what are we doing with wind? We know of many energy projects on the go with wind energy? None, virtually none. So we've got somebody over here who wants to bore holes in the ground and release all kinds of methane and greenhouse gas emissions and the ocean acidification that comes from that. We've got that happening over here. And then on the other side, we've got all this wind blowing by our door and nobody's doing anything at all. And it doesn't pollute, it doesn't cause greenhouse gas emissions. It's clean, and it doesn't require an energy supply to run the windmills. I mean, they run themselves. But no, we don't do that. And I just think it's the kind of logic that's going on there is something which really needs to be challenged. We don't need this thing at all. Thank you.
Yes, we could put a wind farm in a wreck house and power the galaxy. At least look at us. Jesus, Murphy. Do we have to do everything wrong? Do we have to do all the wrong things long after everyone else is giving them up? Is that our fate? Is that our history in Newfoundland?
Yes.
Yes. And now we have, from my own organization, CAP-NL, who works alongside me, is Judith Stamp. Judith, will you give us a few wise words before we conclude here?
Alternatives to Pesticides, Newfoundland and Labrador. The Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides, Newfoundland and Labrador, or CAPNL, is a provincial alliance of professionals, organizations, and citizens who are seriously concerned about the adverse effects of cosmetic pesticide use and toxic substances that threaten the health of adults, children and unborn children, animals, and the environment. Many individuals I speak to, they believe, these are just ordinary citizens like myself, they believe that we are pumping water in the ground to extract in the fracking process. Well, what we're pumping down there include toxic substances. Some of the toxic substances used in and waste from the hydraulic process include petroleum distillates such as kerosene and diesel fuel, which contain benzene, ethylbenzene, and excuse me my pronunciation if it's not up there, it's toluene, xylene, naphthalene, and other chemicals. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, methanol, formaldehyde, ethanol, glycol ethers, hydrochloric acid, and sodium hydroxide. This is a lot more than water, and unfortunately, a lot of our population are not aware of it. We, the Coalition of CAPNL, wish to voice our dissatisfaction with the current situation pertaining to fracking consultations and lack of access to public hearings. We question the appointment of the panel. There's no medical health representative, and as one of my co-panelists here identified, there's no residents of the West Coast, there's no female representation, no Indigenous peoples. We question government's directives in the terms of reference to the panel, which indicate a predisposition to having fracking continued. It seems it's a given. We also question why are the public hearing opportunities so very limited in the timing in that it is rushed. Second, the date is inopportune for most of the population of Newfoundland. And thirdly, the location of the hearings on the West Coast. Again, that restricts a great number of our population. In summation, we seek more openness. We request additional appointments to this government fracking panel. We request more consultation through additional public hearings, and we wish public hearings to be held across the province. In closing, we believe that the province of Newfoundland can and should do better than they are. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great stuff from everyone. And so you can see we have a problem with the all-male, all-unemotional, all-industry panel. And it's the wrong people on the panel. They're not going to enough places, and they're biased, and they're doing it at a time which is user-unfriendly and not accessible. So that's basically it. It's a farce, and it shows nothing but contempt for the process and for the people for whom the process is designed. And that's us. That's the people who are paying for this panel. Let's get it right. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope you can help us disseminate this very important information to the people at large who are kept in ignorance by their governments, and we hope that you can help us to inform them. And thank you very much for coming, and we hope we'll all see you again sometime soon. In this.
Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, of course. This is a press conference after all. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Rick Luzang. I'm president of the Newfoundland Labrador Wildlife Federation. And I came here today to hear the concerns of fracking. I'm not familiar with fracking. I am familiar with fracking, but not enough to make a board policy ruling on it. I was very impressed with Mrs. Alderdice's presentation. She said the ethics issue and the healthy public policies are definitely lacking in this. And that's one concern that our organization has had doing a little bit. And the medical representation certainly needs to be there, because healthy public policies is something we should all be looking at. One of our other concerns, if I may speak on behalf of the salmon, trout, and wildlife of this province, which is our mandate and the environment, is we now have a new Fisheries Act. And the paramount statement in this new Fisheries Act says there should be no harm to fish. Now, with fracking and with migrating salmon, using either both the saline saltwater issues and our freshwater issues, I can't see how there could be no impact on our endangered Atlantic salmon. Right now, in case those are not familiar with it, we had the Minister, Gail Shea, made a special panel a couple of weeks ago by which Newfoundland, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the Lower Shore, Quebec met. The panel was assembled by those people, and it was to look at why salmon stocks are declining in the world overall. The only place salmon stocks are not declining to any great degree is on the northeast coast of Newfoundland, but there is a great decline on the southeast coast. And I haven't got to tell anybody here, the only thing there that we can see is there's aquaculture in full bloom down there, which we know leads to it. But if the Fisheries Act said there should be no harm to fish, then if fracking is harmful to fish, our organization would be most definitely opposed to it. And if migrating salmon and other wildlife animals are affected by this again, we see these impacts now, and we need to formulate a policy that we will come up with, our organization will present. I will bring the issue up in a meeting I have next week with the Minister, Gail Shea, in Ottawa, and to see what they have done from their point of view, DFO's point of view. But I would like to get as much information that I possibly could from the panel people up here. In particular, Fred Winslow, I know, was quite active in it, and Fred and I know each other before. So we would appreciate information to us so we can make an informed policy statement.
Sure, and I'm sure afterwards or whenever, set up a time that Marilyn or Fred or whoever would be glad to share that information with you. Yeah, that's very good points, very good concerns. Thanks. Next, another question?
So there's an emphasis on the deadline of this review submission process, but there's why everybody's calling for reform of the panel, and so are you calling for the panel to be reformed and more cities to be added? Like, you're emphasizing the deadline for this submission process, but at the same time saying it's not legitimate. So what are the hopes? Anybody can answer this, I guess. Is there a hope that the whole process could be restarted? That there would be a whole new submission process? People to
I don't know about a hope. Dealing with this government would be a faint hope, but certainly I think that would be the wish of people here, that this government really go back to step one and reconstitute this panel with a more comprehensive and detailed set of terms of reference, where people will know they will have broad public consultation, where just like in Nova Scotia, the public even had a say on who went on the panel. So yes, we would hope they would go back to step one and reconstitute this panel.
I'm going to do a quick follow-up to that. I was wondering if each of the speakers here could indicate if they have made a submission to date, and also, if not, if they plan to make a submission before the June 1st deadline.
I've made a submission as an individual, and our group has made a submission as the Social Justice Cooperative.
And I've made a submission on behalf of Citizens Against CETA.
Council of Canadian St. John's chapter will be making a submission, and the first part of our submission will be to complain about the process, as well as talk about the issue. And the Atlantic office of the Council of Canadians has already sent in their submission, and we'll be presenting. If there's only going to be sessions on the West Coast, we're going to go there. There'll be a caravan from the East Coast that will go there if we have to.
I see our club has made a submission.
And the reg is, we are going to make a submission, and individual members are making submissions also. Frank Smith gave a superb PowerPoint presentation, which is on the website. He called it all, I don't know, all the facts, all the questions you have about what are afraid to ask. Okay. And after I heard him, I thought, well, maybe I would have enjoyed chemistry if I'd had a course.
Frank is great, yeah. he also works with Cat and L, and he's very, very good.
CAPNL is in the process or has already made their submission, as well as individuals.
I've made at least 2 submissions as an individual, and the East Coast Fracking Awareness group is also going to make a submission.
Thank you.
And just on submissions, there are people here like Erica and Paula who've been holding fracking parties and doing some really creative, unique ways of making submissions to this panel. So you might want to talk to the 2 of them about those creative techniques that they're using. It's fantastic.
If I could just for one moment return to Justin's question about the date. I mean, assuming that we would like to see a panel reconstituted, and we would like to see some more legitimate process put in place, but barring that, we want as many submissions as possible from citizens of the province by the June 1st deadline, so that's a week from now.
Could I speak? I'd like to say personally what I'd like to see the panel disbanded. I think that they're just being asked to reinvent the wheel. We're just wasting one more hours and hours. The only reason you see those flowers there is because I planted them last fall. I haven't been in the garden yet this spring.
I know, what is this panel going to do that New York didn't do? What are they going to uncover? What are they going to investigate? Like, you know what I mean?
So we already know where the money should be spent. The money should be spent to understanding the environment, not destroying.
Yeah, but very little money spent on that in Newfoundland. We seem to think that we have to destroy our environment in order to live. Most people have discovered the opposite. Any more questions?
Government seems to be very silent on where to make a submission to, like.
Yeah.
I accidentally found out about this meeting,
Yeah.
which is when we have an organization representing almost 40,000 members, it's frightening to find that government will do this. Is there an address that we can, what we have looked at so far is the composition of the panel, and from our organization I will tell you that we're not supportive of the present structure of that panel. That much I can commit to. And I'd like to be able to have the address to send our concerns with regard to that particular issue to the whoever I send it to. I didn't even know who sent it to.
They're not helping people to find that out. It's not in good faith. This whole process is being conducted in bad faith.
Yes, it is,
We're spending money to do the opposite of what the intention is. To sabotage the intention.
Can I respond to that? Yeah, so we put the website up here, which by intention or coincidence is not Googleable. So it's NLHFP, Newfoundland Labrador Hydraulic Fracturing Review Panel.ca. It's actually a pretty good website, you just can't find it unless you know the address already. And as somebody mentioned, Erica and I and a few other people have primarily on Facebook circulating information about fracking submissions parties, which have been really well attended and really successful. And the panel has been accepting a variety of different types of submissions and posting them on their website. They don't always go up right away, so you know what's listed on the panel's website now is not necessarily reflective of everything that's been submitted.
www.nlhfrp.ca.
And for your organization, on the website, if you go in under documents under consideration by the panel, there have been many submissions by citizens and groups around the province with lots and lots of great information that your group, I'm sure, could use.
Good, Jerry.
Has this coalition asked for a meeting with the minister or the premier as this coalition? Not yet.
we haven't, but that's a good idea.
Okay, and I know that we as a caucus would be happy to meet with you as well.
Can I just make this point too? I mean, we've been making a lot of assertions about the true purpose of this government with this review panel. It's very likely when this report comes out, it will be in the hands of a totally new government. So I think our focus has to be on that, what potentially looks like is going to be a Liberal government. And I haven't heard that party say how they feel about fracking. I'm going by the numbers, that's all I'm going by, nothing political. So I think we need to focus on them as well in terms of where do they stand on this? And I want to remind the public now that a year and a half ago, the St. John's chapter had a wonderful presentation by the West Coast Fracking Awareness Group down at City Hall, where at the time, one of the contenders for the Liberal leadership, Kathy Bennett, and there were people here who were witness to her stand up and say publicly to people there that she could not see fracking taking place in this province. And she expressed concern for her children.
She was fundamentally opposed.
Fundamentally opposed to it. So I want to know now where the Liberal opposition party stands on this issue. And we talked about ethics and integrity. I certainly hope that Kathy Bennett has some personal and political integrity and doesn't change her mind with respect to her view on fracking compared to what it was a year ago when she was looking for the Liberal leadership versus her new position now as an MHA and a critic for finance in the Liberal Party.
Jim Bennett has publicly supported fracking, from what I understand. So there's
But they need to be our focus too.
Jim Bennett, from what I understand. Although not widely.
And he's the Liberal...
Member for up in the Northern Peninsula. One of the districts that are going to be thrown out.
Okay, so how are we with that? Everyone's had their questions answered, we're good. Thanks everyone for coming. It's been great. Thanks so much to our panel, and if people are free to stay and talk to our panel now if they want next year.